In early 2025, a research team at Google's DeepMind division ran an experiment that was not part of any official project. A group of engineers, fascinated by the crop circle phenomenon, decided to use Google's most advanced pattern recognition AI to analyze every documented crop circle formation from the past 50 years. They fed the system over 12,000 crop circle images from databases maintained by researchers worldwide. The images included formations from England, Germany, the Netherlands, Canada, the United States, Australia, and dozens of other countries. Each image was tagged with metadata, including location, date, size, complexity, whether it was confirmed as human-made or remained unexplained, soil composition of the field, weather conditions when discovered, and dozens of other variables. The AI's task was simple: find patterns, identify commonalities, determine if there were mathematical, geometric, or temporal relationships that human researchers had missed across the massive dataset. What the AI found was not what anyone expected. The pattern it identified did not involve alien messages or ancient symbols. It was something stranger and more disturbing: a progression. The crop circles were not random artistic expressions or scattered hoaxes. They formed a sequence, a mathematical and geometric progression that became more complex, more sophisticated, and more information-dense over time. And the progression was accelerating. This is what Google's AI discovered when it analyzed every crop circle ever recorded. It suggests that whatever is creating the most complex formations, whether human or otherwise, is communicating something that we are only beginning to understand. Crop circles entered public consciousness in the late 1970s, when simple circular patterns began appearing in wheat fields in southern England, particularly in Wiltshire, near ancient sites like Stonehenge and Avebury. Initially, the formations were basic, single circles or rings pressed flat into crops, usually discovered in the morning by farmers or passers-by. By the 1980s, the phenomenon had exploded in complexity and frequency. Instead of simple circles, formations featured multiple rings, geometric patterns, and increasingly intricate designs. The formations grew larger, more numerous, and appeared in multiple countries. By the 1990s, crop circles had become elaborate pictograms, massive designs covering acres of farmland, featuring complex sacred geometry, fractal patterns, and mathematical relationships. The phenomenon peaked in media attention in 1991 when two British men, Doug Bower and Dave Chorley, came forward and said they had created hundreds of crop circles as a hoax, beginning in 1978. They demonstrated their technique using planks, rope, and basic surveying tools, creating a simple formation in front of journalists. For many, that confession settled the matter. Crop circles were human-made hoaxes, artistic pranks created by pranksters with wooden boards and too much time. The phenomenon was explained, debunked, and dismissed by mainstream science. But the confession did not end crop circles. Formations continued appearing worldwide at increasing rates. Significantly, formations that appeared after 1991 became more complex than anything Bower and Chorley had created. Some formations featured hundreds of individual elements, precise mathematical relationships, and a level of complexity that would require massive teams working with impossible speed to create overnight. More troubling, some formations exhibited physical anomalies that simple mechanical flattening could not explain. Plant stems showed unusual bending at growth nodes rather than breaking. Soil samples contained magnetic particles not normally present. The crops continued growing horizontally after being flattened, suggesting they had been alive and undamaged during formation. Some formations appeared in locations where human access would leave obvious traces, yet no footprints or access paths were found. This created a clear split in crop circle research. On one side, skeptics maintained that all formations were human-made, pointing to known hoaxers and the possibility of creating complex formations with careful planning and effort. On the other side, Researchers argued that while many formations were certainly hoaxes, a subset exhibited properties that warranted scientific investigation rather than blanket dismissal. Google's AI analysis couldn't determine which formations were genuine versus hoaxed, but it could identify patterns across all formations regardless of origin, and the patterns it found were undeniable. The first major finding from the AI involved geometric complexity. When the system analyzed formations chronologically, it detected a clear progression from simple to complex. Early formations from the 1970s and early 1980s featured basic geometry, circles, rings, simple combinations. By the late 1980s, formations included more complex geometric relationships, overlapping circles creating vesica piscis patterns, triangular grids, hexagonal arrangements. The 1990s saw an explosion in mathematical sophistication. Formations began incorporating fractal patterns, Fibonacci sequences, sacred geometry, including the flower of life and Metatron's cube, and representations of mathematical constants including pi and phi, the golden ratio. Some formations depicted complex scientific concepts, DNA double helices, atomic structures, three-dimensional objects rendered in two-dimensional crop. The 2000s brought formations incorporating advanced mathematical concepts that even specialists struggled to fully decode. Formations referenced hyperdimensional geometry, non-Euclidean mathematics, and topological relationships. Some appeared to represent visualizations of quantum physics concepts or cosmological models. What disturbed the AI researchers was that this progression was not random or scattered. It was systematic. The increase in complexity followed a measurable curve, not linear growth, but an exponential increase. Each year, the top formations were significantly more sophisticated than the top formations from the year before. If all formations were human-made hoaxes, this progression would require an organized effort by increasingly skilled artists learning from previous years and deliberately escalating complexity. Possible, but it would require coordination and purpose beyond simple pranking. If some formations were not human-made, the progression suggested something even more disturbing. Whatever was creating them was learning, adapting, and deliberately increasing the information density of the messages. The AI's second major finding involved mathematical encoding. The system identified recurring mathematical relationships embedded in formation geometry, and they appeared too consistent to be coincidental. Many formations incorporated the golden ratio phi, approximately 1.618, in multiple ways, including ratios between elements, spiral proportions, and geometric relationships between circles and lines. The golden ratio appears throughout nature, in shell spirals, flower petals, and galaxy formations. Its consistent appearance in crop formations suggested either deliberate mathematical knowledge or a connection to natural growth patterns. Fractal patterns appeared repeatedly. Fractals are geometric shapes that display self-similarity at different scales, the same pattern repeating at smaller and smaller sizes. Nature produces fractals in coastlines, clouds, and plant structures. Complex crop formations showed precise fractal relationships that would require sophisticated mathematical understanding to design. Some formations incorporated binary code, arrangements of elements in patterns that could be translated into ones and zeros. In 2000, a formation near Chilbolton, England, appeared to respond to the Arecibo message that humanity broadcast into space in 1974. The crop formation mimicked the Arecibo message structure, but with altered information, as if providing a reply with different data about physiology, population, and solar system composition. In 2002, another Chilbolton formation appeared, showing what looked like a face next to a disk containing apparent binary code. Researchers who decoded the binary claimed it produced a message in ASCII code, though the translation remains disputed and controversial. The AI identified 127 formations across different years and locations that contained geometric or symbolic elements that could be interpreted as mathematical or informational encoding. The system calculated that the probability of these mathematical relationships appearing by chance was statistically negligible, and concluded that either the formations were deliberately designed with mathematical knowledge or they reflected underlying patterns the AI was programmed to recognize even where none existed. The third AI finding involved geographic and temporal clustering. Formations did not appear randomly distributed across space and time. They clustered in specific locations during specific periods, with patterns that suggested either organized human activity or targeted selection of formation sites. Southern England, particularly Wiltshire, remained the global epicenter, with over 40% of all documented formations appearing within a 50-mile radius of Stonehenge. This clustering could indicate local hoaxers creating formations near their homes. But the AI noted that formations in this region showed the highest average complexity and the most consistent incorporation of advanced mathematical concepts. Formations also clustered near ancient sacred sites, stone circles, burial mounds, and ancient earthworks. Over 60% of formations appeared within 1 mile of sites that were significant in Neolithic or Bronze Age cultures. This could be a deliberate choice by hoaxers for symbolic value, or it could indicate whatever creates formations is drawn to, or references these ancient locations. Temporal clustering was more puzzling. Formation appearances peaked during specific weeks each year, late July and early August, in the Northern Hemisphere. This makes sense for human hoaxers, since crops are mature enough to show clear patterns, but not yet harvested. However, the AI detected micro-patterns within these periods, specific dates showing elevated formation rates across multiple years and locations, suggesting coordination or shared timing influences. Most disturbing was what researchers called the complexity threshold. In 1990, formation complexity increased dramatically and permanently. Before 1990, formations averaged 3 to 5 distinct geometric elements. After 1990, average complexity jumped to 15 to 20 elements and continued increasing. The shift was abrupt, occurring within a single season, and was maintained across all geographic locations showing formations. This threshold event suggested either a coordinated decision by hoaxer groups worldwide to escalate their work simultaneously, or a change in the phenomenon itself, as if something had shifted in 1990 that permanently altered how formations were created or what they were designed to communicate. While the AI could not assess physical evidence directly, the researchers incorporated data from scientific studies analyzing physical anomalies in crop formations. This data revealed patterns that challenged the simple hoax explanation. The most studied anomaly involves changes to plant structure. In some formations, crop stems show elongated growth nodes. The joints in the stem are stretched as if the plant was heated and softened, allowing bending without breaking. This elongation appears on the side of the stem, facing away from the ground, consistent with heating that softened the stem, allowing it to bend and then reharden in the new position. This elongation is a key physical indicator. BLT Research, a team led by biophysicist William Levengood and others, documented these node changes in hundreds of formations over multiple years. They found that node elongation correlated with formation complexity. More complex formations showed more pronounced node changes. They also found expulsion cavities where moisture inside stems apparently vaporized rapidly, blowing holes through the stem walls from internal pressure. Soil samples from some formations showed increased magnetic particle content and changes in crystalline structure consistent with exposure to brief, intense microwave radiation. Control samples from adjacent undisturbed crops did not show these changes. Levengood's work remains controversial. Some scientists question his methodology and statistical analysis. Others note that replicating his findings requires examining formations within hours of creation, before contamination, weather exposure, and human traffic alter the evidence, making independent verification difficult. However, The AI analysis incorporated Levengood's published data across decades of formations. The system identified patterns, formations with physical anomalies clustered geographically in specific regions and temporally in specific years. The anomalies were not randomly distributed. They appeared preferentially in formations with high geometric complexity and in formations near ancient sites. If all formations were mechanical hoaxes created with boards and rope, physical plant changes should be absent or random. The clustering of anomalies with complexity and location suggests two possibilities. Either hoaxers were using techniques that produced these effects, possibly microwave devices, though no such equipment has been documented, or the anomalies reflect a genuine difference between mechanically created formations and formations created by other means. Perhaps the AI's most controversial finding involved what researchers termed information density progression. The system analyzed how much information could theoretically be encoded in each formation based on its geometric complexity, mathematical relationships, and symbolic elements. Early, simple formations encoded minimal information, basic shapes with no clear mathematical relationships. As formations became more complex, their theoretical information content increased. By the 2000s, the most complex formations could encode significant data through binary patterns, geometric relationships, fractal scaling, and symbolic representation. The system calculated that the rate of information density increase was accelerating. Not only were formations becoming more complex, but the rate of complexity increase was speeding up. If the progression continued, the system predicted that from 2030 to 2035 formations would reach information density levels comparable to human written language, capable of encoding complex messages that could be definitively decoded. This finding disturbed the research team because it suggested intentionality and purpose. Random artistic hoaxes should not show systematic information. Density increase over decades. The progression implied either organized human effort, deliberately escalating communication attempts, or a non-human intelligence learning to communicate more effectively through the medium of crop formations. Some researchers have proposed a third explanation that falls between hoax and alien communication, morphic resonance, and collective consciousness. This theory, championed by biologist Rupert Sheldrake and others, suggests crop formations might be manifestations of collective human consciousness, physical expressions of archetypal patterns, and mathematical relationships embedded in human awareness. Under this model, formations would be neither deliberate hoaxes nor alien messages, but emergent phenomena arising from deep patterns in human consciousness, interacting with Earth energies or quantum field effects. The increasing complexity would reflect humanity's expanding technological and mathematical knowledge being unconsciously expressed through these formations. This explanation is scientifically controversial and not accepted by mainstream science. However, it would explain several puzzling aspects. Why formations cluster near ancient sacred sites where human consciousness has focused for millennia? Why mathematical complexity tracks human scientific knowledge development? And why the phenomenon persists despite being debunked by the Bower and Chorley confession. The system's pattern analysis could potentially support this interpretation. The progression of complexity mirrors the progression of human mathematical and scientific understanding. Formations in the 1980s incorporated mathematics known to educated humans of that era. Formations in the 2010s incorporated quantum physics and hyperdimensional geometry concepts developed in recent decades. The phenomenon appears to track human knowledge. However, this correlation could also indicate that human hoaxers are creating formations based on their current knowledge, naturally increasing complexity as their understanding grows. The AI analysis revealed patterns but could not definitively determine their cause. What is clear is that the patterns exist, they are statistically significant, and they demand explanation beyond simple dismissal. If all crop formations are human-made hoaxes, then we must explain. The systematic progression of geometric complexity over 50 years. The consistent incorporation of advanced mathematical relationships. The geographic clustering near ancient sites across multiple countries. The temporal clustering and the abrupt complexity threshold in 1990. The physical plant anomalies documented in some formations. The information density acceleration toward language-level encoding. The absence of definitive evidence, such as equipment, planning documents, or organized groups, to account for the massive human effort required, is striking. If some formations are not human-made, then we must ask some direct questions. What mechanism could flatten crops into complex patterns without breaking the stems? What could create brief, intense, microwave-like effects in soil and plant tissue? What kind of intelligence would choose crop formations as a means to communicate? Why would the phenomenon begin in the 1970s and then escalate in a systematic way? What message, if any, is being encoded through geometric and mathematical patterns? Why would Earth, and specifically southern England, be targeted? The AI analysis does not answer these questions, but it proves that dismissing all crop formations as simple hoaxes requires ignoring systematic patterns in the data that demand explanation. The most scientifically honest position may be that crop formations represent multiple phenomena. Deliberate human hoaxes likely comprise the majority of formations. Natural processes like weather, wind patterns, and fungal growth can occasionally create simple circular patterns. A small subset of complex formations show physical anomalies that warrant serious scientific investigation rather than dismissal. The AI's pattern recognition identified which formations cluster with anomalies and complexity, and approximately 5 to 8% of all documented formations fall into categories with properties that distinguish them from known hoaxes. These 600 to 900 formations deserve careful scientific study. Some researchers are now calling for systematic scientific investigation of fresh formations using electromagnetic sensors, infrared cameras, soil analysis, and rapid response teams to document formations within hours of appearance before contamination. Such research would require funding and institutional support that the scientific community has been unwilling to provide because the phenomenon has been widely dismissed as hoaxes. But if the AI patterns are correct, if formations are indeed showing a systematic increase in information density approaching language-level encoding, then we may be approaching a threshold where the phenomenon produces formations so clearly communicative that they can no longer be ignored or dismissed. What would happen if a formation appeared that contained indisputable mathematical proof of advanced knowledge, perhaps a solution to an unsolved problem in mathematics or physics encoded in geometric relationships that could be verified? Or a formation that contained clear binary code that translates to a coherent message in human language? Such a formation would force scientific acknowledgement and investigation. The AI analysis suggests we may be approaching that threshold within the next decade. So what does the pattern mean? What is the progression building toward? The AI could not answer that. It could only identify that the progression exists and that it is accelerating. If the formations are human-made, the progression suggests we are witnessing an unusual form of art or communication. Anonymous artists using crop fields as canvas and deliberately escalating complexity in an organized multi-decade project. The purpose would be unclear. Unlike typical art, crop formations are temporary and often destroyed within days by harvesting. Unlike typical communication, no authorship is claimed and no clear message is delivered. If the formations include non-human intelligence, the progression suggests a learning process, an attempt to communicate that is becoming more sophisticated as the communicator learns how to encode information humans might understand. The mathematical and geometric focus would make sense as a potential universal language, mathematics being potentially recognizable to any intelligence, regardless of biology or culture. The acceleration pattern is what troubles researchers most. The information density is increasing exponentially, not linearly. This means we may be approaching a point where the phenomenon produces formations, so information dense, that they function as clear communication. Whether that communication comes from organized human groups, from collective human consciousness expressing archetypal patterns, or from non-human intelligence remains unknown. But the AI's pattern recognition proves that something systematic is happening, that crop formations are not random noise, but contain signal, structure, and a clear progression. Google's AI analyzed every crop circle ever recorded and found a pattern. Not the pattern anyone expected, not a simple message or an alien greeting, but something more subtle and more disturbing, a progression. A systematic increase in complexity, mathematical sophistication, and information density that has been unfolding for 50 years, and that is accelerating towards something we do not yet understand. The phenomenon has not been solved or explained, but Google's AI pattern recognition proves it cannot be dismissed as simple hoaxes or random artistic expression. A clear, systematic pattern is appearing in crop fields worldwide. Something is learning, adapting, and building toward communication that we are only beginning to recognize. That is what Google's AI found when it analyzed every crop circle. This changes everything we thought we knew about the phenomenon. The crop circles are not random. They are a progression. We are running out of time to understand what that progression is building toward before it reaches whatever threshold it is accelerating toward. The pattern exists. The AI proved it. Now we have to decide whether we are willing to take it seriously enough to find out what it means.